welcome back to my channel. I'm Rachel, the owner and creator here at the Eclectic Cottage in Spokane, Washington. Happy Sunday, everyone. I hope you had a fantastic Christmas and New Year's. I took some much needed time off and just kind of relaxed and enjoyed some time with my husband. And I didn't even come into the shop for several days except to make sure my cat was okay. So it was kind of a much needed break, but in all honesty, I'm glad to be back and back to work. And I've spent the last couple days starting to kind of tear down Christmas here and there, pack it up and put it away, get some cleaning done, and of course work on a little project for today's video. So today's a bit of a mixed bag just because I haven't had a lot of time yet back in my kitchen, but I did get one project finished for today. It's a pretty simple makeover, but I think it turned out really cute. And I decided, since it was a short video, to go ahead and throw in some footage of the prep work that I've been doing, or that I started basically a year ago at this point, to get a little dresser ready for paint that I had bought at Goodwill many months ago. So I actually started the project back in February last year, worked on it a little bit, stuck it in our garage, and then basically forgot about it until late in the summer, early fall, and then I brought it back down here and started working on it again. So it's finally ready for paint. So my goal for this week is to get it finished and show you guys the finished product. But in the meantime, I wanted to at least show you what I've done so far to get it ready for paint. So that's at the end of the video. Anyway, sorry for such a long introduction, but without further ado, let's get to today's video. I originally bought this cute little rustic wood table to sit out on my covered porch. And even though the porch was covered, this thing definitely saw its share of weather over the years, and it's a little faded and definitely chippy. And so I decided the place to start was by cleaning it up with a good sand. So that's what I'm doing here. I'm just making sure the rough edges are cleaned up a little bit, smoothed out, and there aren't any splinters anywhere before I start painting it. Once I was happy with the sanding and everything seemed to be relatively smooth and splinter-free, I took it back into my kitchen and just swept off all of the sanding dust and made sure everything was cleaned up before I started painting. Now, of course, the whole reason I pulled this out of storage was to use it as the cornerstone of my winter white display that I am in the process of building. And even though that means that it needed to have some white, I really didn't want to completely cover it with white paint. I still wanted some of that beautiful kind of brownish gray patina to show through. So I am just using a cheap little chip brush and barely dipping the ends of the brush bristles in the paint and then kind of dry brushing the paint on. And for the paint, I'm using DIY's White Swan. This is a very easy, simple makeover. The paint didn't go on very thick anyway, just because this little table is so textured. But again, I'm just going over every nook and cranny with a little bit of that White Swan paint. Once I had gone over everything with one coat of the White Swan, I did touch up a few areas with a little bit more paint, not only to smooth them out, but I really wanted this to have the look of something that used to be white that had just sat outside and weathered over time. Once I was finally finished painting my little table, I set it aside to dry, and then I came back to seal my paint. Now, as I've mentioned before, DIY paint is clay-based and it is porous and it needs to be sealed, and my go-to sealer is normally their waxes, and this piece was no exception. One of the nice things about using the wax on this particular table is that it will help to smooth out some of those rougher edges and really sink down and make this more smooth to the touch, which I like. And I am just applying the wax as usual with my soft bristle brush. I'm putting a pretty liberal coat on this table, and then I'm wiping back any excess with my dry shop towel. I did go through, honestly, quite a bit of wax on this table just because it was so textured, but in the end it is nice and smooth, and I absolutely love the way that it all came together. Before I could take my final shots of the new little table, I needed to clear a space for it. So I thought I would just throw in some video of me getting my spools cleaned off and Christmas taken down so that I had a place to put my new little table. So here is the cute little dresser that I picked up at Goodwill for $20. I began this project back in February. So you can see I am in my backyard and I'm wearing my big puffy jacket because it's about 38 degrees outside when I was doing this. But I wanted to get started on it. So I am just removing all of the ugly old hardware. And of course, this dresser had so much gunky paint everywhere that the drawers were really hard to move in and out. So it was really imperative that I get some of that paint off. I had citrus strip at home, so I decided to start with that. So I just went ahead and put a good coat of the citrus strip on each of the drawers, covered each one with some saran wrap, and then let them sit for about 20 minutes before coming back in to do some scraping. As you saw there, I also added citrus strip to the body of the dresser and wrapped the entire thing in saran wrap as well, and then came back and started scraping on the dressers. And this is where I realized I had not one, not two, but 3 coats of paint to deal with on this dresser. And of course, the people who had painted it not only got overspray into all of the drawers, they also painted the outside sides of each drawer as well. So it was a lot of paint to take off. I worked and worked and worked on each drawer, scraping as much as I could off and then cleaning up some of the goo with some mineral spirits as I went. Now, unfortunately, I didn't get quite as far as I'd hoped on this particular day. It was super cold, but it was fairly warm in the sun. But as that sun started to go down, you guys, it was time to go in and call it a day. We put the dresser in our garage, and I think that's where it stayed until probably August or September. Then I finally got it down to the shop and began working on it again. I have to say, it is much nicer to work on this during the summer when it's actually warm outside. And I started by sanding the drawers. I'm just using my little orbital sander to get as much of that gunky old paint off as I possibly could. And you guys, that paint was everywhere. It was on the bottoms of the drawers, it was on the tops of the drawers, it was just everywhere. It took me about 45 minutes to an hour to sand down the outside of each one of these drawers. So here is the dresser with the drawers all sanded, at least the fronts and the tops of them, but I still needed to address the insides of them as well as the body of the dresser. For that, I got a little bit stronger stripper, and I began with the top, just putting a nice coat of that stripper down. I didn't have saran wrap at my shop, so I used a garbage sack to cover it up really well before coming back and scraping paint. The new stripper seemed to work much better than the citrus strip. I don't know if it was just because it was so cold or what the deal was, but the citrus strip really didn't do a whole heck of a lot, unfortunately. This, however, helped really get down to more of the wood, and so I was able to scrape off almost all of the rest of the paint. It was definitely a process, but I just worked on it one section at a time until I had as much of the paint scraped off as I possibly could get. Once I'd gotten to the point where I was pretty much done scraping, I had to remove all of the drawer stops because they were gunked up with paint as well. So this is me just taking them all out so that I can begin sanding. Now you might have noticed that I'd already sanded the top and the sides of the dresser, and I'm just working now on the little bars that hold in the drawers. I'm not looking for complete perfection as I'm sanding. I knew I wasn't going to restain this dresser. The veneer that it has on it is really not the prettiest veneer. I just wanted a nice clean base to start with, and I also wanted to make sure that I didn't have any issues under the paint like peeling veneer or anything like that. And of course, there were a couple places where my sander wouldn't reach, so I had to do some hand sanding on this dresser as well, particularly in this top space and on the turned legs on the bottom. Once I felt like I had the body of the dresser to a place that I was happy with, I set it aside and went to work on the drawers. Of course, I'd already sanded the outside of the drawers, but the insides of each one had overspray to deal with, and since they were all stained on the inside as well, I couldn't just sand off the overspray. I ended up having to sand the inside of every single drawer down to bare wood. I also did repairs along the way. As you can see, this drawer was falling apart. A couple of the others were also having some issues, so I had to break out my wood glue and glue things back together again as I went. most part, my orbital sander did a really good job on this dresser, but it couldn't reach the very corners of each of the drawers. So I ended up having to buy a completely different sander just so that I could get those corners sanded clean. This project was definitely a lot more than I had bargained for, but I am glad that I'm finally done with prep work on this little dresser and it is ready for some paint. Well, that's it from here for today, you guys. I hope you liked my little mixed bag video. What did you think of the little table when it was finished? I know it was a really simple makeover, just some paint and some wax and ta-da, but I really think it's a perfect addition to what I envision as my winter white display. I can't wait to show you the finished product. So stay tuned. At some point, I will take you on a little tour of the cottage once it is all rearranged and ready. If you enjoyed today's video, please remember to give it a thumbs up. I so appreciate that. And if you haven't already, I would love it if you would subscribe to my channel and then just hit the little notification bell so you don't miss anything. And then don't forget to drop a comment below and let me know what you thought of today's project. Just a quick reminder too, the paint and products you see me use can be purchased through me at my website, and that's www.theeclecticcottagespokane.com, as listed below in the description box. I carry the DIY paint and products as well as Sweet Pickins milk paint and products, and their color Flower Sack is currently 35% off through the end of January. And I also carry some recycled treasure decoupage papers as well as Redesign with Prima products, and their new release is now rescheduled for the 29th. So I will definitely be showing you guys the new product as soon as I possibly can. And then let's see, for Thursday's video, it is going to be a thrift haul, mainly because there are some items in my stash right now, or in my junk run, that I need to show you so that I can get them washed up and put into the winter white display. So it will definitely be a thrift haul for Thursday, so I hope you'll join me back here for that. Until then, I hope you have a fantastic rest of your weekend, beginning of the week. Thank you guys so much for being here, and again, Happy New Year, and I will see you on Thursday. Bye.